They immediately seen the situation and called for air care. And that was very early on in the call when they were on the scene, and he called for them about 4 minutes after he arrived on the scene.
Esteban is a very humble man. And what I mean by a humble man, he's a man that he washed dishes for a living. And even though he had very little income, he really loved other people, and especially small children. He loved to play with them. And he had gone up to Goodwill when one of the things he wanted to do was see if he could afford a secondhand bicycle, because there was a lady downstairs, single mother, had 3 children that she was trying to raise by herself. And he had gone up there to see if he could afford a bicycle for one of the kids. And so when he was outside, the driver of the truck got confused, and when she pulled into the parking spot, she thought her foot was on the brake, but it was on the gas.
He says that if he would have known that the truck wasn't going to stop, he would have moved aside, but he just never knew. So the truck came and hit him against and pinned him against the wall.
And so the closer she got, the more gas she gave it, and it jumped the curb and over a sign and hit him and pinned him against the cinder block wall, and still thinking her foot was on the brake instead of accelerator, she kept pressing. And so what happened is she crushed and pinched his legs off.
He kept telling her to back up, and she wouldn't. I think she kept going more and more, pushing the gas, and that's how the truck destroyed basically his legs. The truck backed up a little bit, and then I was able to see the blood, and at that time I think she moved a little bit more back, and then she got out, and I was able to see that she was a woman, and I just fell to the ground. I couldn't stand anymore, and then I don't remember anything else after that.
Immediately some people inside Goodwill had called the police. The police were on their way. Paramedics were there.
The paramedics all have a standard protocol that they follow for all EMS runs, and part of that protocol gets into specifically trauma, and there are specific protocols that talk about when it's appropriate to use air medical transport versus ground transport. So in addition to the standard protocols through the Academy of Medicine of Cincinnati, which is the protocol that we follow, then we have our own policies on when it's appropriate to use, because obviously distance from the hospital, location, whether the person's trapped or not, there's other things that go into whether you're going to transport by ground or by air. Obviously, we're always trying to provide the best possible care that we can to our patients. Not only are we looking at how we can do that in the pre-hospital setting, but ultimately long-term definitive care, what is in the best interest of the patient. And all those things go into the decision as to how these people are going to be treated at the scene, and ultimately how they're going to be transported and to which hospital they're going to end up going to.
When we landed, they put us in the back of the squad, and the first thing that we saw was the injuries to his lower extremities. And the squad was telling us that he could not speak English, so there was no way for us to communicate with him whatsoever, because none of us spoke Spanish or anything. So when we were in the back, the only thing that I could do was just to pat him and try to talk to him. And even though I would tell him what I was doing, I knew that he didn't understand me, but he would shake his head yes. And so what we had to do, because of the extent of his injuries to his lower extremities, we had to make sure that those were wrapped and not bleeding too much. And because of the extent of them, we knew that he had lost a lot of blood. He had 2 IVs that the squad had started, which helped out a lot. When we got him into the helicopter, the first thing we did was, after I took his blood pressure was like in the 70s, and after I took his blood pressure, we hung a unit of blood. And by the time I got him back to UC, he stayed awake the whole time. By the time I got him back, I had actually given him 2 units of blood by the time we got back to UC. So when we got to the emergency room, his blood pressure was up to like 110. So one of the things that they want us to do is to give them blood right away if we found that they've lost blood, because that actually helps them out in the long run. And that's what we did. When we got him there, the trauma team was waiting for us when we got there, and they brought in an interpreter to talk to him, so they got all of his information. And when they turned around and looked at me, they told me that they didn't know if they would be able to save his legs. And I saw that when I had first looked at him. I knew that that was a possibility. And you always know that that's really devastating for the people when they any of these injuries that they have. So I actually went back and followed up with him in the surgical ICU. But all the times that I went up there, he was always like out of it, and he never did see me go up there. But I always follow up with all of my patients that I fly in. I follow up with them and with their family.
When I was at the hospital, I was able to meet a blondie.
I was working one day, and some guy from the hospital called me and said he was the Spanish interpreter, and I'm going, okay. I'm thinking, I don't know Spanish. I don't know why you're calling me, And he said, he says, did you fly in Esteban? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, he's in the clinic, and he would like to see you. So I went to the clinic when he had come into the clinic, and I went to see him over there.
We were at the hospital for a follow-up exam when we met Deborah, and she saw him, and she's not a very big gal, and she just wrapped his arms around her, and he wrapped his arms around her. They just both wept. I was weeping too.
Oh, that was amazing, because when I went in, I looked around and I saw him sitting over there, but then the guy that he was living with at the time, he came up to me and he just grabbed me in a big hug, and and so then he was crying, and then he made me cry, and then Esteban came over, and he couldn't speak any English, but he looked at me and he said, thank you. He did say thank you. And his eyes were all teary. It's like, oh God, it's like, so he and I sit down, and I just bent down in front of him and, and just told him, and the guy was, interpreting for me. I told him, I said, I'm just so glad that you did, you did fine with this. I'm so glad you're doing well, because I was really worried that he wasn't going to do okay.
Mike Tango, good day. And so we have weather limitations such as ceilings, 800-foot ceilings. For example, 802 are our local weather limitations. That means we need the ceiling to be 800 feet, and we need 2 miles visibility. Okay, so if we have that, we're legal to go, okay, under our air care program. Well, to be honest, we really do not know, are not supposed to know anything about the patient, and that's for safety reasons. We get a mission, whether it's inter-hospital, transfer from hospital to hospital, or a scene, which, like you're saying, somebody had a car wreck on the road to here. They ask if we have the weather, legal weather. We determine that, and then we go get the patient. How big's the patient? And that's really my main concern. If I'm going there and I know that I'm at the limit on my gross weight, then I'll ask the dispatch, can we get a patient weight? And then we may just have to burn a little more fuel once we get to the hospital to make it, to make sure we're under our gross weight limitations.
They do the magic in the back. I mean, they do all that work to be able to take care of those patients, to see some of those accident scenes that we fly into, and those patients are in dire need of critical care, and the doc and the nurse do a wonderful job of taking care of the patient. And I just kind of look at it as my role is to get them safely from point A to point B. And we all work together as a crew when we get into an accident scene or we go to a hospital. When we have the patient on board, my focus is being able to take the patient from the scene or the hospital back, to the more advanced care. We always, when we take off from here, have safety at the forefront of our minds when we do our job, because we're not going to help anyone by crashing the helicopter if we're going out there to save someone's life that's been in a crash themselves.
What we do, we have safeties. We go to the different fire departments, and